Al Jazeera Podcasts.
Braids are too ethnic. We don't do ethnic in the news.
Sorry. We don't do ethnic in the news. We don't do
ethnic on the news.
The difference in our hair, the way that it looked, was used to demonize Black people, to shame them.
When it comes to policing women's bodies, it would seem that nothing is off limits, even our hair. And if you're Black, well, then everyone's got an opinion. But why and how did this perception that Black women couldn't wear their natural hair become the norm? I'm Samantha Johnson, and this is Now You Know, a new series from Al Jazeera dedicated to amplifying women's voices, stories, and at times, some pretty uncomfortable topics. This is a safe space where we go all in, so by the end of each episode, you can say, now I know. For some women, when they look in the mirror, their hair is controversial. To other people, that is. Someone who knows all about this is Lukwesa Burak, an international news presenter. Now, she's fought for the right for Black TV presenters to wear Black hairstyles on camera. Lukwesa was born in Zambia and moved to England when she was just 8 years old. And despite being gone for so long, she's well loved in her birth country and celebrated for representing the Zambian diaspora community. Now, to others, she's a respected journalist at the BBC, but she has her own story to tell, and one that Black women can probably relate to, especially if you work in the media. Her hair. So, Lukwesa, thank you so much for joining us on Now You Know.
It's lovely to be with you, Samantha. An absolute honour to finally meet as well, a fellow sister in the industry.
It just took a show to get us together, but I'm glad you're here. Now, Lukwesa, I want to go through your your accolades. So you have a long list from working with Africa Edition on ENCA in South Africa, to Sky News, to Al Jazeera English here in Doha, to finally the BBC. But again, we're not here to talk about, your list of accolades. We want to talk about your hair journey and the many strides you've made in this arena. So I think it was more than 10 years ago, you made the step, a bold step, to go on screen with your Afro. Now, to some, it may not seem that big of a deal, but we both know it's quite the statement. So can you tell us what took you to that journey? What took you to that point?
Frustration. Eventually, it was sheer frustration and health as well. I actually started at the BBC, and even then, I was confused. I mean, I got it because I'd grown up with it. It wasn't right, but I understood why it was more acceptable for me to have more European-looking hair, less distracting, less ethnic, as I was told when I started at the BBC. So that's what happened in the early days at the BBC. And it wasn't until I was at Sky News, and I went through everything at Sky News. I had a weave, didn't have braids, never really had braids until when was it? About 3 or 4 years ago, I suppose. I finally thought, enough. But certainly at Sky News, weave, I had my hair texturised, which is sort of halfway to straight.
Not as harsh as a relaxer, but yeah.
That's right. And I like body. I like celebrating my curl. And I'm thinking, well, why on earth should I hide what I was born with? So it was kind of the halfway house for me. And also I'd been burnt terribly by chemical relaxers, and they're just not good for you. And I eventually went to my boss and I said, listen, I can't do this anymore. It's taking such a toll on my hair. And he says, well, what do you mean? I said, well, this isn't my hair. You know that, don't you? And he said, no.
Oh my God.
And bless him. He himself had an education, my boss at the time. And he said, well, what do you mean, Quest? I said, well, I am to get my hair this straight, because I was blow drying it and setting it at that point. I said, it's 2 hours at home and another hour when I get into work. I said, that's 3 hours just on my hair. And then obviously an hour in makeup. And he went, oh, no, that doesn't sound good. He says, well, what are you going to do with your hair? I said, I'm going to cut it. I said, I'm going to cut it. And he says, well, okay. He says, as long as it's not a distraction, as with everyone else, on TV.
But what did he mean by distraction, though?
There is this thing, isn't it? It's just grooming. We do our hair before we go out. And there's nothing negative about it. You're going on screen, you're presenting an image, you tidy yourself up. It's not a bad thing. And he said to me, he says, as with everyone else, as long as people are there to listen to the news and as long as the image is polished and professional, absolutely fine. I said, oh, don't worry, it's not going to be a crazy afro. And he says, no, I know you. So I went away and very kindly, there's a magazine called The New African Woman. And they said, we'd love to actually chart this. So we did a fashion shoot where my hair was blow dried and then it was cut and it was cut shorter, all in the space of 3 hours. Took photos in between and then it was the final reveal. And I had I think it's called a TWA, isn't it? Teeny weeny afro or something like that.
I've seen the pictures. It's beautiful, beautiful, moisturized curls. And
yes. I felt liberated, Samantha. I felt free. It was cheaper.
Yeah. People don't realize how much it costs to look after black hair. So when you made the big chop and you went on air, how did you feel? I mean, look, you got to think about the news and you've got to think about what you're actually doing. But on the other side of your brain, you're like, oh my gosh, you're doing something that is huge for you, like a huge personal step. So can you just take us through those moments of what you were thinking before you went on air? When you started to hear the countdown?
No. Samantha, it started when I walked through the front doors of the office.
Wow. Okay. Wow. What was everyone's reaction?
I sat there in my car, and I took a deep breath and I thought, why are you scared? And then I thought, well, it's my career. I could lose my salary next month because there is that fear in this industry. It's very image driven. And whilst the audience may be far more intellectual than I think many broadcasters give them credit for, and diverse, we're not broadcasting to our colleagues. We're broadcasting to the world, to a society, to a community, and you have everyone in that community and society. And up until recently, we haven't been representing our community and our society. So I thought, okay, come on, let's go. Walked up to the doors, electric doors whooshed open, security guards on the desk. And it was a lovely Asian man. And he just looked at me, and we always used to talk about his daughters who are doing amazing things in law and medical school, And he just looked at him and he went, very good.
That was it. Seal of approval, done. That's it. And you can stride in there, stride into work.
He just went, very good. I went, okay, walked in, went to see my team for my debrief, and they just looked at me and they went, wow. And I thought, I'm not going to ask wow, good, wow, wow, question. You done? I just kind of said, I said, yeah, let's get on with it, guys. This is me. And we just got on with it. I walked into the makeup room, and the ladies in the makeup just clapped.
Oh.
They all just clapped. And they went, and they said to me, girl, you look fierce. You look strong. But as she said, it was walking to the desk, sat down at the desk, and the gallery, fantastic director I had, and she was like, are you all right, Quess? She had a mixed race daughter. She's Italian. I said, I'm okay. She says, you're okay, girl. You're okay. She got what I was going through. You okay, Quess? Are you okay, Quess? I went, yeah. She says, you look great. You look great. You look great. 3, 2, 1, doo, doo. The music starts. And I just looked in the camera and I just thought, bring it on.
Very good morning to you. Well, up to 1 million people have packed the streets of London to honour Britain's
and I just went
greatest
for it. And I
team.
was sitting up a lot straighter. And then, at the time we had access to the company emails, the company public email. And started receiving the emails.
And what were those emails?
Not pleasant. Not pleasant. But it was just from a small section of the usual trolls, you know. You look like a monkey, orangutan, you know, the whole complete insult to the monkey kingdom. Yeah, you know, I can't watch you get off my screen. Oh, it was tough when reading that because you know you're always checking the emails for news or whatever. And then I just stopped. I literally just stopped checking, and I just got on with the shift. But from everyone else, you know, it was great. But all it takes sometimes is one negative comment because it taps into that deep fear, and you know how controlling fears can be.
Yeah.
That was tough. It was a tough night. Yeah.
Did you get any support? And when I say support, not just from the newsroom, but from, I don't know, social media, from the public as well.
The worst comments I had were from the UK. All the bad comments I had were from the UK, which was disappointing. But it was great, you know. Oh my goodness, I'm so glad my daughter's watching. He says, I remember a father saying, I've actually just run upstairs to get my daughter to get her to come and watch the news. And he says, and that's what I want her to see. That's who I want her to know she is as a Black woman. And she doesn't have to hide. She doesn't have to change. And that was it. After that, it's never been an issue. The next big thing I had was getting braids in my hair, but that came further down the line. Yeah.
And what was the reaction to that, getting braids?
I was particularly terrified about the BBC because the BBC, maybe because of the time that I started, you know, it was a very different time. And it was that very first time I was told that when I had a conversation with my manager about doing something that was less stressful on me, on my hair, and affordable as well, because we don't get expenses within the BBC. And I said, you know, I need to do something that's more in keeping with me and it's easy maintenance and blah, blah, blah. And they said, well, what were you thinking of? And I said, well, I could either braid my hair, or I could have it in a bun, just pulled back. So, you know, a neat French bun or whatever. And they said, oh no, the French bun is too severe. Okay.
Okay.
So, braids are too ethnic. We don't do ethnic in the news.
Sorry. We don't do ethnic in the news.
We don't do ethnic on the news. And you know, I was so young. If I'd had that comment now, oh boy. But I was so terrified. I just started in the industry. I was so scared. You know, you just sort of sit there going, okay. And then I mentioned cutting my hair short, and it was like, oh no. You know, almost the implication that it was butch, unfeminine. You know, the conversation that was had. So I went back to texturizing and, you know, sometimes blow drying. But yeah, it really took a toll on my hair. You know, it was tough.
It's funny. Look, I understand the irony of me sitting here talking about hair with you and our hair journeys, and I've got a wig on, and everything that you're saying, I just identify with. I mean, I started in broadcasting when I was 23 years old. I'm now 40. And I had a really good think about, okay, what was I thinking about? Like, because I knew I wanted to be on screen, but I didn't see any women like me on screen. So how do I represent myself? And I was thinking, was I pressurized to having straight hair to make sure that I would get the opportunity? And looking back, I just thought, you know what? That was just the done thing. It was an unsaid rule, not necessarily with broadcasting, just in society. It's like, just get your hair relaxed. That's it. And, you know, get a few tracks in. Like, it was the norm. Lo and behold, now we realize that, okay, relaxing your hair is really, is quite unhealthy for you. I spoke to some other women in our industry, not just in the UK, some are based in the US, some are based across Europe. And we have similar stories. Now, I think it's getting better because we're taking control and we're more informed. But do you think it's getting better?
Yes, and I think what it is, it's not that we've been allowed to do it. We took the control back. Yes.
Mhm.
I think that was kind of, whether it was intentional that this power was held over you, or it was an expectation on our part that we had to look this way. I think it's us, it's on us, I think now particularly. And for somebody to come back and say, no, that's got not good enough, you better had a damn good reason to tell me why I'm not good enough. Um, and it's just saying, right, listen, I've done my hair. I look great. I look as professional as the next person.
Mhm.
Um, let's get on with it. It's not an issue. And yeah, I think we have evolved. We've evolved ourselves as women in accepting our hair, learning our hair, because we've had to learn so
We've
much.
had to, we've had to learn a lot. Yeah.
We've break a lot of habits. We've had to learn how to love ourselves and our hair. And I think when it comes from us, it's a lot easier for those around us to accept. Your friends accept you as you
Mhm.
are, and it's just that I think it's like a lot of things in life. If you're confident in who you are, people a lot of the time don't see what you see. They just see the friend or the colleague. And if they see otherwise, they shouldn't really be within your circle. They're not good enough.
True.
This is just purely from a very personal point of view. And I've had to learn this the hard way, that it took too much of me and it cost too much to try and conform. And I've let go as I've got older. But I think as time has passed, people are beginning to see the real African woman. And I think they will, not African, but black
Mm.
woman. There is always going to be personal preferences, and you can't force somebody to like or dislike. But at the same time, you can't force somebody to look the way you want them to look.
Mhm.
And I think that is one of the first things that we've got to get rid of.
But when it comes to your career, I mean, again, we hold a lot of power, which is great. And I love that for us. But ultimately, the person on the other end of the table, they're the ones that have to give us the opportunity or the jobs. How can we change that? How can we, I don't know, it just seems like the power's out of our hands when it comes to that.
Do you know what? I would love to have a boss on your podcast,
Mm.
and I'd like him to take a truth serum. And I would love to hear whether hair actually is an issue, because I don't know what I can do to educate somebody, because they will never admit that they have that prejudice. You will never, ever, particularly nowadays,
Mm.
you will not hear that. Trust me, you won't. You might if you're working within broadcasting or within television. If you're working in dramas, you style according to the character
Mhm.
that you're playing. When you're working in news, you are a news anchor character. Okay, so we dress accordingly. We're not going to turn up there with a t-shirt,
No,
are we?
no.
We dress smart, presenting the news. So the whole image is smart. But out in the professional, other, outside of broadcasting, I really don't know how to change people's ideas of how they see me. But the problem is, how do you prove that there is that prejudice within someone and it's affecting your career? How do you prove it, Samantha? How would you, how do you do it? How on earth would you do it? I just have now the the benefit of old age
Let's
in
not
that.
say experience. Let's say experience. Come on, come on.
Beneficial experience.
No, but but you're right though. You've gone through it all, and you know how to handle yourself, especially when it comes to the media industry. So, what advice would you give to any young Black woman who wants to get into the media, especially if they do want to get on screen? I mean, it sounds trivial, like, oh, how should you represent yourself in your hair? But what advice would you give to them or pass on to them?
I think first off, take a good look around at the peers and those of us that are in the industry today, because there are I mean, look at Fleur. Woo!
I know. There's
It's like hair. And I mean, It's part of her identity.
Mm.
Take a good look around, because we've all had to take a journey. We've all been there. We all get it. Use that maybe as your support,
Mhm.
your prop you up. Whatever aspect of broadcasting and media you want to get into, you will dress to that image. Okay, that's by the by.
Mhm.
All right, that is just the way it is. If you're going to go into a court, you dress accordingly. All right, don't try and start resetting social rules, because you're not going to get very far.
Yeah.
You dress for the job. But when it comes to your hair, look around. There are those of us that have broken down those barriers for you guys. We have the scars. We
Oh, the
have the receipt.
burns. We have the alopecia.
Yes, we have the alopecia. My God.
No.
We've been there. Just take that step forward, but look up, make sure you are happy with whatever you choose, because it'll always be there, and you'll always be thinking, they're looking at my hair, they're judging my hair, they're this, they're that, they're that. If you're not happy with it, it's going to come out. If you're happy with your hair, you'll just be an amazing, confident, calm, whatever your particular character is. The real you will just get on with getting on at work, whatever aspect of the media is. I mean, I walk into news organizations now, and I work with a couple of different ones, and I see everything, and it's beautiful to see. And I make a point, particularly when I see a young person within the media industry, men and women, because it's fantastic to see the men who are also doing great stuff with their hair, and I'll say, I love your hair. Oh my God, that looks great. Because I know deep down they've had that little element of doubt before they've closed that front door that morning. It is still there. It's a shame. It's still
It's
there.
still there. It has been a real hair journey for you, and you've won.
We've done it, Samantha. We've done it. And for all the other ladies and young boys as well, young men coming through, I keep saying men, because they're going through a similar thing, they go through similar things, not to the extent that we do, but we're there for you. And just know that every time you close that front door and you're thinking, if you think that, the day that we don't do it, and I think we're getting there,
Oh, we're
because I'm
getting
seeing
there.
younger people with great hairstyles, wherever it is. You're not alone. Trust me. You are not alone. Yeah.
Lukwesa, you're a joy. You are a joy.
Ditto.
You are a joy. Thank you so much. It's very healing, isn't it? Having conversations like this. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah. Samantha, thank you very much. Thank you.
So that's Lukwesa's story, and one that other Black women might be able to relate to. But do you know how we even got to a place where Black women have had to bear the brunt of hair bias? Who set the standard of how we should be wearing our crowns? And how do we fix it? Laurie L. Tharps is a journalist, professor, and author of the book Hair Story. It explores the culture, history, and politics of Black hair. So, Laurie, you are the perfect guest to bring onto the show. Thank you so much for joining us on Now You Know. And I suppose we can call you an historian?
Yes, I actually call myself a hair historian, so that's perfectly fine. It's great to be here.
Great. I just want to kick off with this. Why does the world and its dog have an opinion on how Black women should wear their hair?
Well, I would like to answer that in a positive way by saying, because our hair is amazing. That is why. But it is actually based on the fact that our hair is different than European hair, if you will. It's different than Asian hair. And I'm saying that different in that the very nature of Black hair that grows out of the heads of people of African origin, wherever they are in the world, grows up and out, generally speaking, as opposed to straight and down. So the very nature of our hair makes it fundamentally different when it is in the context of a Western beauty aesthetic. And whenever something is different, people have an opinion.
For centuries, Africans have worn hairstyles like braids and knots to signify wealth, tribe, and status.
We know that only certain people were allowed to touch the hair and style the hair. And each style had a lot of significance. You could tell who a person was simply by their hair. And then through the process of the transatlantic slave trade, we know that the hair was unceremoniously shaved off. People were completely disconnected from that loving relationship
That
with
identity
their
was
hair.
taken from them.
And absolutely. And then on top of that, the difference in our hair, the way that it looked, was used to demonize Black people, to shame them, to make them feel closer to an animal than human. Because it was so different, it was a very easy way for white slave owners, for example, slave traders, to show Black people, to begin the process of brainwashing and making Black people feel like, again, they were less than, they were uncivilized, they were less than human, all using the hair as that point of difference. And so over time, the hair became that part of the body that Black people were trained to believe that it had to be shaped and formed and blown dry and straightened to approximate white standards of beauty. And so it has been continuously been the kind of place of the Black body that has been manipulated and changed and judged because it's so visual. So we get to this place where it's not just hair, because it is, again, most often the place that we are first judged, whether or not we have made the full crossover to quote unquote assimilate into Western ideals of beauty, but not just beauty, but conformity. That's what it says. And so when, your earlier question, why does everybody have an opinion? Because people are really judging Black people based on whether they have conformed, whether they have bought into cultural, social norms and are ready to quote unquote play by these rules instead of the old rules. There's a lot in people's assumptions about who a person is simply based on how they choose to wear their hair. The significance of how we wear our hair really connects with ideas of believing in, again, that there's some sort of value in cultural assimilation.
We have come a long way. And just speaking to Lukwesa about our own personal hair journeys, especially as women working in front of the camera, when we first started out in the industry, we just thought this is just normal. We didn't see any other women like us. So to get that job, maybe we did have to have straighter hair or whatever. But now we're getting more comfortable just, even when it comes to me, I'm wearing different varieties of wigs. I wear my hair natural or wear it out, whatever, but I still feel like I have that freedom. So I do agree with you that we're getting somewhere, and there's a lot more conversation to be had as well. But I was just wondering, how might hair bias manifest in a professional setting?
Right. And I do want to I'm going to answer this question, but also just touch on something you just said as well. What we are aiming for, those of us who are in this hair advocacy space, is not a world where every Black woman wears her hair in natural hairstyles. We're aiming for what you just mentioned, hair freedom, hair liberation. And that's actually a message that I'm seeing kind of globally, hair liberation movements, which simply means that women of the global majority, Black women, brown women, no longer feel that they have to wear their hair in a certain way. If you want to wear your hair straight because you look beautiful with straight hair, then you should wear your hair straight. If you want to wear your hair curly in its natural state or in an afro because it's just easier to maintain, you should be able to do that without being judged harshly or lose your job, etc. That's where we're aiming to be, which, again, we are definitely getting closer to. So the way that hair bias could manifest in a workplace, for example, really looks like one of two ways. The most obvious one is you're simply not given a position that you're perfectly qualified for because of the way you wear your hair. And this is most often when we're talking about a corporate setting where there are either very specific norms that are spoken and understood, or they're maybe a little more subtle, but we understand that there is a uniform, there is a look that you are supposed to come to the office in. And if you come to that interview and your hair perhaps is in dreadlocks, or maybe it's in a larger afro, and sometimes people will be very specific and say, you can have the job if you change your hair.
According to a new study, the bias is real. Black women's hair is 2.5 times more likely to be looked at as unprofessional. A majority of black women, 66%, change their hair for a job interview, and 41% end up straightening.
That's what hair discrimination can look like. We know that many men who worked for, in the United States specifically, who worked for delivery services, meaning like mail delivery services, private mail delivery services, they weren't allowed to wear their hair in dreadlocks because of assumption that they would scare the people they were delivering to, for example. There was an assumption that certain styles were scary.
Where did that come from, that it is scary for someone to wear dreadlocks? Where does that stem from?
We know that a lot of the information we as Westerners, as Americans, have about African hairstyles in the 15th, 14th, 16th century come from European explorers who were engaging in trade with people on the African continent. This was before the slave trade. This was when really it was exploration. It was mutual trading going back and forth. And they often wrote about how significant these hairstyles were. It was their journals where we found out that there were 14 different styles that different people wore in this particular tribe, etc. And they were writing about them because they were so in awe. They were like, these are amazing. These are incredible. We know that this woman must be the wife of the chief because her hairstyle is so elaborate. Meanwhile, jump ahead in time, and we know that it was the fear that a lot of white people, for example, in Kenya, we know that the term for dreadlocks stems from the fight with the British and the Kenyan warriors. And they said, oh, they're wearing that dreadful hair because they literally did grow their hair to make themselves look more powerful in what we today would say dreadlocks. But it was from that dreadful hair, which is why today a lot of people take the A out of dreadlocks and spell it D-R-E-D instead of with the A in the middle. So the idea that these certain styles are scary often comes from the fear of white people themselves. The same thing with the Afro. We know that, a lot of protesters in the 1960s civil rights movement in the United States and beyond wore that Afro as a symbol of defiance. And so even though by the 70s, Barbra Streisand was wearing an Afro, okay, and we had taken out the bite of the Afro, it's almost like the fear that white people felt about those angry Black people still sticks with the hairstyle, even though their anger was simply, hey, I'd like to stop being treated like a second-class citizen.
There's a section of our Black hair history that few people understand, and that's the issue of texturism. So can you give us some context about that particular part of our history or Black hair history?
What texturism simply gets at is another form of hierarchical judgment of how a woman's hair looks. And where that comes from is simply the closer the texture of the hair resembles Caucasian hair, the better it is. But within the boundaries of a Black or brown context. In other words, we have, and there are types of hair. Like there's hair typing, there's categories. People might have heard of like, I have A1, B2,
4C, yeah.
A4.
Yeah.
So these references, again, are gradations. And there's, in theory, they're supposed to take it out of the context of getting to have mixed girl hair or white girl hair or these awful terms of good and bad hair. Good hair being hair that is closer to that of white people, bad hair being much thicker, denser, kinkier, like hair that comes, quote unquote, directly from Africa, which even that is such a misnomer because the African continent is so massive and everybody doesn't have the same texture of hair. So much misinformation means we as Black and brown people have more work to do to eliminate the idea that was laid upon us by colonial powers, by slave masters, that we would be more valuable. And that's where it comes from. We would be more valuable if we had lighter skin and looser curled hair, because then that would mean we had a closer association with whiteness.
We could sit here and talk for hours about this. We could really, really go deep into this, but thank you so much. You've really given us some great context into why our hair is, it's not controversial. I hate the word controversial because to us, it's normal, it's fine. But to anyone on the outside looking in, it's deemed as controversial. So again, thank you for bringing context to it. I really appreciate you. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. And I could talk about it all day long, but that's why I just wrote the book about
There
it,
you go.
because there's so much to know about it. And it's just fascinating and ever changing and ever evolving. And I think it is the best way to understand the Black community is start with our hair.
Thank you so much. So now you know the root of why Black women's hair has been stereotyped and stigmatized, but more importantly, how we can reclaim our power and wear the hair we were born with. Now, personally, from a girl who's had the relaxers and the weaves, growing out the perm and the heat damage to wearing protective styles, I have to say, I love seeing how we, as Black women, are breaking some deep generational curses about what is considered to be good hair. We are taking control and re-educating ourselves when it comes to our crowns. But also, I just love how versatile we are when it comes to our looks and how much freedom we have. Now, I love my wigs and I love my natural hair, and I love the women who have fought to normalize Black hair and the ones who keep the conversation going. So consider this a little love letter from someone who is on her own healthy hair journey. Whatever you decide to do, whether you're rocking your braids, your Afro, weaves or wigs, do it with pride. And quite frankly, and listen carefully, it's no one else's business how you wear your hair. I really want to thank Lukwesa for sharing her emotional hair journey, and to Laurie L. Tharps for giving some in-depth context into the topic. And of course, a special thanks to you for checking in with Now You Know.